I didn't think much of the place at first. Just the coffee shop on the corner, the one I stopped at because it was halfway between the bus stop and the laundromat. It smelled like burnt beans most mornings, but it was quiet, and I liked how the light came through the dusty windows. That was enough for me. Then she started showing up, not every day, maybe once or twice a week. Always late morning, always with a paperback in her bag. She looked like someone who should have been heading to an office or a meeting, but instead she lingered at the corner table, her phone face down, a thermos she never opened beside her. She was older, mid-40s maybe, my friend's mom. That's how I knew her. I'd been to their house a couple of times in high school. Pizza boxes, video games, nothing serious. I remember her in the background then, moving through the kitchen with a calmness that didn't need attention. I never thought I'd see her here years later, in the same coffee shop I used as an in-between place. The first time we noticed each other, it was almost too small to count. She caught my eye, just long enough for me to glance away too quickly. But the next week when I ordered, she leaned toward the barista and said, "He usually gets the same thing, right? Vanilla latte, no sugar?" I froze, halfway reaching for my wallet. "You remember that?" Her smile tilted, not coy, just knowing. "I notice things." The barista laughed and rang me up. I wanted to say more, but I just nodded, pressing my thumb into the corner of the receipt until the paper softened. That became the rhythm. I'd come in, she'd already be there, or she'd walk in after me, and somehow we'd acknowledge each other without making it obvious. Sometimes she asked about school or work. Sometimes she didn't ask anything at all, just sat there, and I found myself too aware of her turning the pages of her book, of how she brushed her hair behind her ear. I never told my friend. It didn't feel like something to tell. I kept noticing small things I shouldn't have, like how her ring finger was bare, how she stirred her coffee even when she hadn't added anything, how she laughed, softly, not loud, but it carried, and it stuck with me on the walk home. And me. I had my own tells. I'd fold the napkin on my lap into neat, uneven squares until it looked like scraps. I'd glance at her hands when she set the book down, tracing the underline of a sentence with her thumb. I tried to look casual, but the truth was, I was waiting. One afternoon I stayed longer than usual, pretending to scroll through my phone. A half-written text sat on the screen, unsent. "You around tonight?" I didn't even know who it was for. I just stared at it until the words blurred, until I realized I'd been listening for the scrape of her chair, the sound of her leaving. She caught me looking, not in a bold way, just a flick of her eyes, then back to her cup. But when she stood up to leave, she passed close enough for me to smell her perfume, something faint, citrus and smoke. She leaned down, just enough for her voice to be low. "You always look like you're thinking too hard." I blinked, unsure if she meant it as a joke. My mouth went dry. "Maybe I am," she smiled. Then with a pause that felt heavier than it should have, she said, "Don't overthink this, okay?" And then she was gone, the bell above the door breaking the silence she left behind. I sat there, napkin torn to pieces in my hand, until my phone buzzed. A text, unknown number. "Next time, it's on me." The text sat on my phone all night. "Next time, it's on me." No name attached, but I didn't need one. I read it twice, then 3 times, then locked my screen like it might burn me if I looked too long. The following week, she was already there when I walked in. Same corner table, same thermos unopened beside her. I tried to act casual, like I hadn't been waiting for this moment since the message, but she noticed. She always did. "Vanilla latte?" she asked, closing her book without marking the page. I nodded. "You really don't have to." I said, "It's on me." She waved the barista over before I could finish. When she pushed the cup across the table, her hand lingered a moment too long on the cardboard sleeve. I caught myself looking at her fingers, steady, unhurried, and pulled my gaze away before it could mean more. We sat there longer than usual, neither of us pretending we had somewhere else to be. Silence wasn't uncomfortable with her, but it wasn't exactly easy either. It was like holding a note that stretched further than you expected, waiting to see if it would break. She was the one who broke it. "My ex hated this place," she said suddenly, eyes still on her cup. "Said the chairs were too close together." I blinked, caught off guard. "You're divorced?" "Almost 10 years now." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. He thought leaving me for someone younger would make him feel younger. It didn't. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, pressing my palm flat against the warm cup. The idea of her marriage, of someone letting her go, didn't make sense to me. "You know," she added, glancing up, You and I shouldn't even be sitting here like this. The words hit harder than I expected. Because you're my son's friend. She said it lightly, but the pause between each word carried weight. If he knew, he'd probably kill me, I laughed, a nervous sound that felt too loud. We're just having coffee, her gaze softened. Are we? I looked away, pretending to study the people outside the window. Inside, my thoughts looped, imagining what it would look like if someone walked in, if my friend saw us, if she suddenly decided this was a mistake and left. But she didn't leave. Instead, she reached across the table, pulling the napkin from my restless hands. She smoothed it flat, her nails tracing the crease I'd folded into it. You always fidget, she said, voice quiet. I used to do the same when I was your age. I'd twist straws until they snapped. My mother hated it, I managed to smile. Guess I never grew out of it. Some habits, she said, folding the napkin once more and pressing it back to me. Mean more than you think. Her fingers brushed mine as she let go. It was the smallest touch, barely there, but it stayed long after she leaned back, as though she had placed something heavier than paper into my hands. The next time, it wasn't the coffee shop. I was heading home when I saw her outside the grocery store, struggling with 2 bags that looked ready to split. I almost walked past, but my feet turned before I decided. Here, let me help. She startled, then laughed softly. You again. You always appear when I least expect it. I carried 1 bag heavier than it looked. We walked the block in silence, the plastic handles digging into my fingers. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't comfortable either. Something in between. Her apartment building was the same as my friend's, 1 floor below his old place. I remembered standing in the hallway as a teenager, waiting for him to grab a controller, her voice calling from the kitchen. Now it was just us, the memory pressing in. Inside, she set the bags down, shaking her hands out like she'd carried too much for too long. Thank you. I would have managed, but she trailed off. But her eyes lingered on me a beat too long. Then she smiled. But it's nice sometimes to let someone else carry the weight. The air shifted. Too close, too easy. I moved to the counter, pulling out a carton of milk to distract myself. She stood beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her shoulder. You don't have to stay, she said, though her tone didn't match the words. I don't mind. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, then turned it face down. For a moment, I wondered if it was him, her son, checking in. The thought made my chest tighten. I tried to joke it away. You always hide your phone like it's classified. Some things are better not left open, she said, and I wasn't sure if she meant texts or something else entirely. We moved slower after that. I helped put groceries away, passing her jars and boxes. Our fingers brushed once, then again. Neither of us said anything. At one point, I caught her watching me. Not curious, not casual, something heavier. My throat tightened. It isn't really a good idea, is it? I said, the words tumbling before I could stop them. No, she shook her head, then softer. But that doesn't mean I haven't thought about it. The silence cracked wide open. I couldn't look at her. My hands found the counter edge, gripping until my knuckles ached. When I finally turned, she was closer, too close. Her breath was steady, eyes flicking from mine to my mouth, then back again. Something shifted forward, an inch, maybe less. My heart slammed. Then the door down the hall opened, a neighbor's footsteps echoing. She stepped back quickly, like nothing had happened. I swallowed hard. She picked up the milk, set it firmly in the fridge. Thanks for the help, she said, voice even, almost casual. But her hands trembled just slightly when she closed the door. She stopped coming to the coffee shop. At first, I thought it was timing. Wrong days, wrong hours. But by the second week, the seat in the corner felt more like an absence than a coincidence. I ordered the same vanilla latte anyway, sat at the same table, pretended not to notice how empty the air felt. I told myself not to think too much about it. She'd said herself it wasn't a good idea. Maybe she'd just decided. Then one night I ran into my friend. We hadn't spoken in months. He laughed when he saw me, slapped my shoulder like nothing had changed. Mom says you've been around again, he said casually, helping her with groceries, coffee, whatever. That's cool, I guess. I froze, my mouth forming words that didn't land. Yeah, just by chance, you know. He nodded, unconcerned. But his eyes searched mine a second longer than they should have, like he was waiting for something I couldn't. That night, I typed a message and erased it. Everything okay? Deleted. Do you not want me to come by anymore? Deleted. The screen glowed against my face until I locked it, the words swallowed whole. A few days later, I finally saw her again. Not at the shop, not at the store, on the sidewalk, late afternoon. She wore sunglasses, though the sky was gray, and her step was faster than usual. I almost didn't call out. She hesitated before stopping. "You shouldn't be here," she said, though I hadn't followed her. I started, but she cut me off. "My son asked me about you." Her voice was calm, but the undertone was sharp. "He thinks it's nothing." "It is nothing, right?" My chest tightened. "If that's what you want it to be." Her lips pressed together, as if the words she wanted to say were too dangerous. She glanced past me down the street anywhere but my face. "You're too young to be caught in the middle of someone else's history." History? My marriage. My divorce, my mistakes. The last word cracked, almost too quiet. I wanted to reach for her, to tell her it wasn't like that. But my hands stayed at my sides. The distance between us felt heavier than if she'd slammed a door. "You should focus on your own life," she said finally. "Not mine." Then she left. No backward glance, just the sound of her heels on the pavement until it faded. I stood there, hands in my pockets, rehearsing words I'd never say out loud. That night, the coffee shop chair was empty again. I took my usual seat anyway, latte cooling untouched. My phone buzzed once, but it was just a reminder about rent. I typed a message. I deleted it. The cursor blinked like it was waiting. I locked the screen, slid the phone face down, and for the first time I didn't wait for her to walk through the door. It happened on a Thursday night. Rain tapped the windows, soft and steady, the kind of sound that makes everything feel closer. I hadn't planned to see her. I was just walking home, collar up, when I noticed the glow from her apartment window. She stood inside, framed by the lamplight, watering a plant that looked half dead. I don't know what made me stop. Maybe it was the way her hand lingered on the leaves, as though she wanted to keep something alive that had already let go. Before I could think it through, I was at her door, knocking once, twice. I almost ran after the second, but then it opened. She looked at me, surprised but not startled. "You shouldn't be here," she said, though the edge in her voice was thinner now, frayed. "I know," I said. My shirt stuck to my shoulders from the rain. But I had to. She let me in, hesitating only a second. The apartment was quiet except for the rain outside. I stood awkwardly near the doorway, not knowing where to put my hands. "You're making this harder," she murmured, setting the watering can aside. "I don't want to make it harder," I said. I don't know what you want." Her breath caught. She looked at me then, really looked, as if weighing something too heavy to carry. "What I want doesn't matter." She stopped, her hand brushing her forehead. "You're my son's friend. You're 20 and You think I don't know that?" My voice cracked, too sharp, but I didn't pull it back. "Do you think I don't feel the difference every time you look at me and then look away?" Silence stretched, filling the room like fog. I wanted to take the words back, but I couldn't. She stepped closer, slowly, her face softened, tired but honest. "I've spent years keeping people at arm's length. Easier that way, safer. And then you show up." She laughed under her breath, a sound without humor. "You make me remember things I tried to put away." Her hand touched the counter, not me. A safe distance. Still, the space between us narrowed until I could hear her breathing, steady but uneven. "I don't want to hurt you," she whispered. "You already have," I said quietly. "By pulling away, by pretending none of this matters." Her eyes glistened, not tears exactly, but close. She let out a long breath, then reached for my hand. Just that, no more. Her fingers cold, mine damp from the rain. We stood there, neither speaking, the storm pressing against the windows. Finally, she gave the smallest smile, sad but real. "Okay," she said. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a future. Just one word carrying everything we couldn't name, and in that moment it was enough. Time passed. Not fast, not slow, just steady, the way mornings give way to afternoons before you notice. The coffee shop changed owners. New baristas, brighter paint, but the same corner table by the window. We never sat there at the same time anymore. It wasn't avoidance, just rhythm. Sometimes her schedule, sometimes mine. Still, when I walked in at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, my order waiting before I spoke, I knew she'd been there earlier, and sometimes when she came in the afternoons, the barista would already know her black coffee, Extra hot because I'd been there first. We didn't make plans, not at first. We just let the patterns overlap until they felt intentional. A walk here, a grocery run together, the bench in the park where the lamppost flickered at night. She never said the word love, neither did I. But the way she poured tea into a chipped mug at her place, sliding it across the counter without asking how I liked it, that was love. The way I folded her receipt into crooked squares, leaving them in her coat pocket for her to find later, that was love too. Her son knew eventually. He didn't say much, just raised an eyebrow one day when he saw me at her kitchen table, then shook his head and grabbed a soda from the fridge. "Whatever makes you happy, Mom," was all he offered before heading out. She laughed after the door closed, relief softening her shoulders. He takes things better than I do. It wasn't simple, though. There were days she pulled back, quiet and guarded, and I had to remind myself not to take it personally. And there were days I doubted, wondered if she'd wake up one morning and decide she wanted something easier, someone closer to her age. But then she'd touch my wrist when handing me a mug, or smile across the park bench when silence stretched too long. Small things, anchoring things. Enough. One night, months later, I found her waiting outside the coffee shop just as I was leaving. No plan, just timing. The rain had started again, light but steady, the kind that made everything smell sharp and clean. She didn't say anything at first, just linked her arm through mine, her hand cold against my sleeve. We walked like that, no rush, no destination. After a while, she looked up at me. "You still think too much," she said, echoing words she'd spoken once long ago when all of this was still impossible. I smiled. "And you still pretend not to." Her laugh was quiet, low, the sound I carried with me even when she wasn't there. At the corner, we stopped under the awning, rain dripping steady. She tilted her head, eyes searching mine, no hesitation now. Just a simple truth hanging between us, understood without needing to be spoken. She reached for my hand, squeezed once, and whispered, "Okay." That was enough. More than enough.